You're all set up there.
Oh, thank you.
Muted as well.
But you is unmuted?
Yes, you're all good to go.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I can hear you, Judge.
Good.
Hey, Mike, how you doing? Good, how are you? Good.
All right, being 1:30, we'll call the meeting to order with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Hi,
of the
United States of America,
States of America, and
and to the republic
for
which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible, with
liberty
liberty
and justice for all.
These proceedings are being recorded for the sole purpose of constituting the accuracy of written minutes. Tapes are reused, eliminating recorded records of these proceedings.
Okay, I'm just noting that Commissioner Notstein and Controller Severcek are unable to make today's meeting, but we still have a quorum. We will move on to guests. Are there any guests appearing before the prison board today? All right, hearing none, we'll move on to the official actions. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes for the meeting held on January 20th, 2021.
Sheriff, just some housekeeping on this. On page 4 in the large paragraph, disbursement is misspelled. And on the last paragraph there, the third line, it says February 8th and would like to again. So I already talked to Jody and she changed those, corrected those mistakes. But that was the only thing I saw as far as any punctuation and the spelling.
Okay, yeah, I just have one note, report on the warden's report, 76 in the second line. Should be a hyphenated word.
Okay.
Okay, so with those corrections, we're looking for approval of the minutes for the meeting held on January 20th, 2021. We need a motion.
Second. I'll make a motion.
Second, Chris.
Okay. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? No. Motion carries. Report of executive sessions held.
There were none.
Okay. And now we'll move on to the report of committees, and we'll begin with the maintenance report.
Okay, Sites Brothers were in for their monthly service. Clean Air Systems were in to clean the kitchen exhaust fan. Mechanical Services came in to fix the main generator due to an auxiliary fault. Allstate was in to clean out the grease trap pit and the grinder pump pit. Ecolab was in to fix the dispenser pump on female washing machine. Train finished their preventative maintenance on the rooftop units, and Tremco was in to get information for their roof quote. And that's all I have under the maintenance report. Well, other than that, if you saw the next couple pages, I did do a spreadsheet on all of the different items we have up here that was requested from the board to get dates and on when things were installed. It's still kind of a fluid document. They're still researching some things, but we got some dates as to when some of our equipment and stuff was installed here. And we're continuing to take care of that as time permits.
I believe there were some questions from the controller who said he wouldn't be here. And I guess, let me see here.
I'm here, Tony.
Oh, okay. So the controller also said that he was looking to get some progress on getting the equipment inventory together. And then he was just indicating that some of the items are very old, like more than 26 years old. So he's just looking to see if we're going to have a regular and prospective inspection of the items, but I think that's part of what the warden is doing. Is that correct, Warden?
That's correct.
Okay. Any other questions on the maintenance report? All right, we'll move on to the work release report.
Work release is still suspended, pending up until today's meeting. We had, at last meeting, I requested that the board suspend work release as well as fingerprinting due to the uptick that we've had in COVID. At this point now, we are pretty much clear up here with it. We have a few inmates who have come in recently that have tested positive and they're being quarantined, but everybody that was positive has been cleared by the doctor for getting back into regular population and stuff now. So I don't know what the board's wishes are at this time, if we should maybe look at possibly starting work release and the fingerprinting back up again or not.
Warden, what does the work release directors, what's his opinion on this?
We kind of talked about it a little bit. As of right now, we may have one or two people that, that would still have a job that could get back out. Some of the employers have been, talking about it, asking when we might do it. At this point, I think we have maybe 6 or 7, 8 people in our work release block right now. So, he says whatever way we want to go. I mean, I think we're comfortable with starting it back up if the board so chooses to. I don't think it would be really any more of a a concern other than when we get new individuals in here. We're dealing with that too on a daily basis. So it's something I would say, especially with the fingerprints too, with the fact that things are starting to back up a little bit with that maybe we give this another try and see how things go.
Warden, is it still correct that the work release individuals will be segregated from the main population?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't have any concerns about infections should we resume work release?
Correct.
Okay. And is it your recommendation then that we proceed to reactivate fingerprinting and work release?
Yes, I would say if we start that maybe this coming Monday, the 22nd, that way we can start fresh with a new week and get things rolling again.
Okay. So is there any other comments from the rest of the board regarding the warden's recommendation? Okay, appears that there's no opposition, Warden.
Okay. And then the other thing we had, and I don't know if Commissioner Lukasevich kind of wants to talk about this, being the chairman of the work release committee, but we, again, we're talking about the work release policy and some of the questions that Judge Nanovic had. And I kind of sent that email trail to everybody, for your perusal. And if anybody has any questions or concerns on this, we'll gladly try to answer them.
Tim, I just did a screen share. You should see the 5 inquiries that the judge originally brought up. Those should be shown on your screen. Am I correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So I think what has happened is on at least 3 of the 5, the committee has reached consensus on a recommendation. And I've kind of gone from easiest to hardest. The first one being the disqualifiers for work release, which was page 1, number 9, about adding burglary and possession. And the recommendation would be to add all burglary and possession charges as disqualifiers for the program.
Correct.
Right.
So I just have a few questions. I made some notes on these. So the burglary, the reason for, do we know what the reason why burglary wasn't included before?
It's just that, over time there have been, maybe extra burglary charges that have been added to the crimes code. And, just wanted to make sure that all of those were covered under this clause, and not just, the ones for that, were in the beginning. There's every year, I guess there's different crimes codes and stuff added to that. And we just wanted to make sure that we covered all our bases with burglary and possession charges.
And possession charges, what's different from possession wasn't a disqualifier before?
No, the same thing. We did have possession, but obviously other possession charges have been added to the crimes code over the years as well.
Okay, so this is just.
And also, if I may, the possession with intent to deliver, if it was a second offense, that was a disqualifier for those first-time offenders. Historically, we did allow those into the work release program.
Okay, so possession with intent is now a disqualifier?
Correct.
Do we know how many potential inmates that would affect?
We haven't looked at that, no.
Okay. That's all I have on that first one.
Okay. Number 2 is a work release in regards to self-employment. And the recommendation is in regards to this matter to make it a case-by-case basis. Is there any opposition to that? Any concerns with that being a case-by-case basis? Are we good on that, Tony?
I think so.
Yeah.
I didn't hear any.
Okay, all right. So the third one was on the room and board fee. That room and board has not been modified for over 2 decades. It was 20 per day, 140 per week. The recommendation would be to go ahead and increase that, adjust it for inflation. That would bring it up to approximately, or would be up to $30 a day and $210 per week. There was no concern that would be overly burdensome to any of the.
Commissioner,
Yeah.
just one item of note. I do have some offenders that are working minimum wage jobs.
Okay.
So in those instances, their pay wouldn't cover the room and board. So I would have to adjust that. So some discretion there in cases where someone, for example, is working for $8 an hour. They're probably going to bring home maybe $200 a week. And of course, they're going to need some personal expense money. But
Right.
As far as paying room and board costs and fines, they're not going to quite meet the level of pay needed to cover that. So In that case, for those making lower wages, I would have to use some discretion and adjust that.
Well, then how do you want to include that? Because that wasn't in any of the responses. So how would you like to modify the recommendation to take into account those low wage earners who would not be able to meet that requirement?
Right. Well, one of two options. We could exclude them from work release, which I don't know if that's the greatest idea, or make adjustments based on their wages.
So I just have a quick question. Was there any consideration of a percentage-based payment? That would kind of qualify low wage earners from high wage earners.
That could work.
Yeah. Yeah, we could go back and re-look at that, starting as 20 as kind of the base and work up from there, figuring out what would be an appropriate percentage.
Another thing we could do in instances like this is, we could still charge them the $30 a day. Maybe if it's a low wage earner, only take $20 to $25 a day to make sure that they have some money, whether they, need it for bills at home or, for personal expenses and things of that nature. And then just like we would anybody else that maybe would be sentenced but wouldn't be on work release, just hand them a bill after their incarceration to let them know what their balance is that they owe.
That could work too, Ward. That definitely could be a possibility.
At the same time, we are penalizing further high wage earners, and high wage earners could have skill sets, invested time, money, effort, to get up to $14 an hour. So there is something to be said for that also,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking as we were talking here, and I was thinking, Commissioner, is maybe a cap.
Yeah.
A percentage to a cap.
Yeah.
And then this way you don't have that situation where you have a potential high wage earner paying a disproportionate amount.
Yeah.
If we're saying that, it's now going to be $30 a day, cap it at that, but have a percentage for anything that's less than that might be a kind of a way to go.
All right. Then my recommendation would be we table this one. Let us go back and relook at that.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. So, and I think the last two, we didn't have any clear understand. There's four of us. We didn't have any clear leanings one way or another on this. And this is a medical clearance requirement. Simply, should inmates require some type of clearance, I will say from competent medical staff in order to return to work. And we're going to leave that up to discussion. I had thrown out there that there should be medical clearance by some medical staff member, not necessarily the physician. But I know Frank, would like a little bit more discretion for that individual who had the headache or cold, just to kind of send them back to work, not necessarily needing clearance. My counter position would be, I don't feel we're competent authorities to determine if it's just a headache or if it's something more than that. And therefore, so some level of medical clearance, even if it's from one of the other staff members, would seem appropriate. But again, for conversation.
Yeah, I had some questions about that because I was wondering how it was going to be administered. Like, how is the determination going to be made for an individual who reports that they're too ill to go to work? Yeah. Who's making that call?
Right.
And I was a little confused. I thought maybe that person was going to report to, a sick, and then have that person who's monitoring that, the nurse or whatever it is, say, I don't think this person should be going to work based on the reported illness, as opposed to them going back. So there's kind of two areas there that I was just unsure about.
Mm-hmm. Frank, do you want to weigh in?
Yeah, and initially my thoughts, but now hearing some arguments, initially I was thinking something to the effect of, let the inmate handle that through their employer. So if their employer is comfortable having them back with the work release program, sure, we'll you're telling me you're okay to work. If your employer doesn't require you a doctor's note, it was just the sniffles or a cold. However, on the flip side of that, the prison doctor, not knowing a lot of the medical history, they may not feel comfortable clearing someone for something as simple as a headache. To go to an extreme, somebody has a brain aneurysm and the doctor cleared them, that kind of thing. So, there is some gray area here where how far do we want to go with this? Should we leave it up to the employer, or if a person reports off sick for any illness, are we going to get involved with our medical department to at least have an examination?
What is the current practice?
Right now, if an inmate reports off, for example, for a day they're sick, if they're telling us, the administration, hey, I'm fine to work, we'll allow them to go to work.
And what would be the compelling reason to change your current policy?
I think Judge Nanovic originally, did question if someone does have a cold or something like that, is it necessary to get a medical clearance to have them go back to work? So to that question, I'm not sure how we want to respond to that.
Well, in the past, it wasn't required, is what we just
Correct.
said, right? It was not.
Correct. It was not.
Yeah.
So again, that's why I asked the question, is there a compelling reason to change our current policy?
I would say no, there is no clear indication that there's a requirement to change it.
Okay.
So is then the decision to go ahead and retain the existing policy in regards to medical clearance, which basically puts it up on both the work release participant and the work release program director or manager.
Well, I think it would also include the employer, right, Commissioner?
Right.
Right.
Yeah. All right.
And Frank, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we've ever had any issue where if somebody, reported off sick for work, that their employer gave us any issues about having
No.
them checked by medical, correct?
No,
All right.
no, there was never a situation like that. And with a work release individual, certainly they can go to their own doctor. Being on work release, that they can seek their family physician should they need a medical clearance to return to
Good.
work.
All right. All right, good. So on the last one, and conversation went back and forth and continues so on the inmate having to serve one half of their minimum before eligible. Frank, do you want to go ahead? Your
Sure.
comment, please.
Sure, and that half the minimum, that is something that the court can override, however you want to put it, at the time of sentencing, especially in the case where an individual is going to lose employment. They're reporting to jail. They may lose employment. Certainly the court can make that person eligible for immediate work release. But for someone that doesn't have immediate work release, they come in, they didn't have a job, or in a lot of cases, unskilled people, by enforcing that half the minimum, we're allowed to observe that inmate, their behavior, make sure they have no misconducts before they apply for work release. And work release being a big privilege, they kind of have to go through the system and earn the privileges for work release. So that may be remaining misconduct free, not getting in any altercations, but also utilizing the in-house work program. So we can put them in a position, maybe a block or unit worker. They might move up to a laundry or custodial position. They might be able to move to outside working with maintenance or the community program. So for those offenders that don't have employment or weren't made immediately eligible, it gives us a chance to work with that offender and see exactly what their behavior is like, and to see that they show some responsibility and get a little bit of vocational training. For a lot of these offenders, they haven't worked really at any job. So by having that half the minimum, person doing a 6-month sentence, that gives us 3 months to observe their behavior and sort of cultivate a working type environment.
Yeah, Frank, though, is there any indication that, and again, think about the long-term individuals, and I think this is part of the conversation maybe in the last session was, you have someone who's doing a year sentence, should
Right.
they have to wait 6 months? Because we have no data that shows, 45 days compared to waiting 180 gives us a better sense of their proclivity or capacity to be successful, correct?
Right. However, by serving that one half the minimum, they're kind of over the hump. They're on the downside of their sentence. So rationally, if they're going to take off, if they're going to be a problem, but by making them wait to that half of their minimum sentence, it does help us to encourage them to do the right thing.
Do you know, though, Frank, normally inmates are not necessarily very rational people, or they wouldn't
Oh,
be-
no, absolutely. And
I'm just
when
saying.
it comes to addiction, there's nothing rational about that. So there's
Right.
violations where
Yeah.
we have a lot of irrational.
Right. All right. So, the recommendation really was, the primary was, again, and this is weighing on Frank. I know, Tim, you had a little bit a different of a perspective.
Yeah, and normally we've gone with 45 days, as the cutoff, and my perspective is to maybe try to get more individuals involved in the work release, because it's kind of been stagnant over the years where we've had less than 10 people on work release at any one time, to maybe kind of cut that down a little bit and have maybe a 30-day incarceration prior to being eligible. It may help in some cases if individuals maybe do have a job but weren't granted immediate work release, that they'd have a better chance of maybe keeping that and getting out to start working. But I can see both sides of it as well. We obviously want to make sure that these people succeed and don't fail in this. So I'm kind of torn either way here. I'd like to get more numbers, obviously, on the program. I think as we all would, but we also want to do it in a safe and effective manner too.
I have a few questions. So, Mr. Schubeck, getting back to what you were discussing as kind of a transition to work release with the in-house work program,
Correct.
is there any reason why that couldn't happen, even if there wasn't a half serving half of the minimum sentence?
And it could, yeah, absolutely. The offenders could be eligible for those in-house positions. Yes, that's still something that could happen.
So let's say an inmate comes to the prison who has no work experience. Instead of putting a floor on when they're eligible for work release, why couldn't we just have them transition to outside work release through an in-house work release program? For example, maybe as the warden said, after 30 days or some other arbitrary number, that they would be eligible for in-house, and then maybe after completing 60 days of in-house work release, then they can transition to outside work release, as opposed to having that floor. And the problem I have with that floor of half the minimum is, I understand that there's a need to evaluate inmates before they go on work release, but in many cases, a lot of that is done. There's a pre-sentence investigation or a bail investigation that's available from the probation office. You can get an idea of risk from what those things are. And there's also the intake information that is collected at the prison that can give an indication for risk. Because I mean, when someone's going out to work release, one of the things you want to assess is risk of flight. But that's the kind of thing. I'm just wondering, it almost seems to me like we should be making it more advantageous for people to go out and get work skills rather than holding them back. Because in my opinion, if you're having someone sit for half their minimum, what are they doing with that other than sitting there with other ineligible inmates? Wouldn't it make sense that they would be out in the community getting some skills? And that's the way I'm looking at it.
Right. And in speaking with Schuylkill County, I spoke with their work release director. For those that don't get immediate work release, they put them on a community program as a stepping stone to go out on the regular work release program when they do find employment. So certainly that is a strategy that might be helpful.
Right.
I think that's a good one.
The other thing that crossed my mind is, I know it doesn't happen often, but I know from my past experience, you may have an individual who comes to confinement absent a job, but family members are able to get them a job. So
Correct.
the judge may not say he's eligible for immediate work release, but there may be a situation where a week or two after confinement, an individual can go to work. And I don't see why we would want to stop them from having that opportunity because of a rule that says you have to serve half of your minimum. So there's some, I'm concerned about that bottom floor. And I understand that the judge, any judge can order immediate work release, and I would implore the judge to do that because I think it's a well-known fact that one of the most salient factors to individuals released from prison on their success to the community is employment. So I think that has to be one of the major issues that we have to address here. So again, I'm just concerned about policies that we adopt that are going to limit the opportunity for inmates to get out in the community and get some work skills.
So, Sheriff, what I heard is being put on the table was still a minimum of 30 days, at which time they can transition to an in-house program for up to 60 days, at which point they can go to work release outside of the facility.
And that was based on the comments by the warden. I was just picking arbitrary dates off the top of my head, but that, Commissioner, that still doesn't affect the person who obtains a job while they're incarcerated. So what do we do about that person? We would want to get that person out as promptly as possible. So again, they could come to prison without work. And they could go through that process as 30 or 60 or whatever is determined to be the best situation. But it still doesn't address the person who may obtain work while they're incarcerated within weeks after being confined.
Wasn't it a fact there's an exception to almost every policy? So I don't know, I understand the point, but I don't think we'll be able to address all issues. Therefore, I think you have the base policy, and the reality is unique circumstances, like I'll call them unique, like you describe, are going to pop up, and a case-by-case basis will have to be made on those because one size isn't going to fit all, even with a policy.
That's correct, Commissioner. And that person obviously would have the option to petition the court.
Right.
For, immediate work release. Judge, I don't know if there's any time limitations on any kind of modifications to a sentence that would come into play there. I'm not sure how that would work.
I don't think it would apply to work release. I mean, there are time limitations, basically 30 days from when a sentence is imposed, to basically change the sentence. But to me, work release is not really changing the sentence. It's just giving him the opportunity to do something within the sentence that was already imposed.
Okay, well, that answers that question. So,
but I think where you were coming from, Tony, if I understood you as correctly, as saying maybe there's no need to impose any floor here for work release, just let it up to the individual circumstance. So that if you have someone who comes in that internally the prison thinks can do internal work for the prison, well, they're going to say if they're going to determine inherently if that person is suitable. If you have someone who didn't have a job at the time of sentencing, but in your situation found a job through help of their family within 10 days, well, if it's a suitable job, it's a good paying job, why would you want to deprive them of that work? Because
exactly.
I agree with you that being able to get work and make money and support your family is rehabilitative in and of itself and makes for a better, prisoner who's going to come out better, I think, and hopefully hang on to that job when he comes out.
Correct.
So I sort of gathered from what you were saying is maybe we should put no floor there and leave it to the individual situation again. Either the prison itself saying when they're eligible internally for work at the prison, or to if a suitable job is found, evaluate it, confirm, verify the job's there, and if it seems appropriate, let the person go out.
I agree. But from the prison's point of view, I understand, and we had this situation where even when the court orders immediate work release, there is a delay. And I know that, is it still 1 week, Mr. Schubeck?
Yeah, it's about a week, Sheriff.
Okay. Okay, I mean, and I was concerned about that because some employers won't wait a week. But I understand that there has to be some kind of evaluation of a situation, work employment situation that has to be verified, and transportation and those kinds of things need to happen. I'm just not so sure it takes 5 working days to do that. You know, again, I'm just rolling with what the warden has suggested, and you know, up there for discussion. But you know, in my opinion, I think that we should be doing everything possible to have inmates out working, you know, while still being able to verify the details of that. And again, you know, there are tools out there to use that: pre-sentence investigation reports, bail investigations, you know, prison intake. And I think that, you know, it's entirely possible to do this in a more rapid fashion. Again, and that's going to be gauged by the number of individuals on work release too. I mean, if you only have a few individuals on work release, you can knock these things out in a couple of hours. But as the population grows, it may take a little bit longer. But you know, parroting what the judge said is, you know, I think we need to not have, you know, so many floors on eligibility, and we should be really looking at more options on eligibility to kind of make that process a little quicker so that we can get individuals out into the community and working. Because, I mean, again, if you just kind of look at it, and I just looked at it from, you know, the options, what are the options, and what would happen if you didn't do that? Well, now you have an inmate who's staying in the prison, and that person is spending their time with other ineligible people, as opposed to going out and working. Number one. Number two is now we have a person who's contributing to the prison, to their family, to their, you know, court costs and fines. They're being productive members of society, and they're getting themselves a work record. So I understand that in many cases, and I'm sure Mr. Schubeck will agree with me, is that inmates are on work release because of arrangements made with certain employers, and they want to do that for inmates who are confined because they have more control over reporting for work and so forth. But the benefit of even that period of time, if they're unable to keep that employment because they live outside the area, they're still building themselves a work record that they can use to get other employment. So,
Okay, so then I'll recommend is we'll go ahead. We're going to relook. The work committee is going to, I'll send out an invite for the work release committee to get together virtually in 2 weeks. We're going to relook at eligibility and the room and board. Today, we've also agreed upon the disqualifiers. That's adding all burglary, possession, case-by-case basis for work release for self-employment, and the medical clearance will remain unchanged. That's all I have.
One thing that Commissioner, you just brought up another point here. Is there any opportunity for an inmate to appeal a disqualifier?
Essentially, they could petition the court directly through their attorney, or do it themselves. And in that case, they could get eligible. If they're not eligible, they could become eligible by court order.
Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Yep.
All right, anything further on the work release report? All right, we'll now move on to the warden's report. Warden?
Okay, as of this morning, we had 166 inmates in-house. Of those, 34 female and 132 male.
Are there any questions on the warden's report? All right. We'll entertain a motion to approve the warden's report.
Move to approve, Chris.
Do we have a second?
I'll second Tony. It's Rocky.
Okay. All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say no. Motion carries. We will now break for executive session.